Hello, my name is HeeSun Lee. I'm the founder and executive director of InWave. Our mission is to celebrate unity through Korean culture. We are starting these heritage talks, and our first guest, we have HeeSun Lee and also Dan, aka Dan Matthews, joining us to talk about their experience as a Korean American living in the United States. Our series going forward will be featuring different people with different backgrounds and different stories related to their Korean heritage. It will be leading up to our live panel, which will be featured during Korea Fest 2022 on November the 19th. It will be in the Exposition Center at the NC State Fairgrounds. In continuing the AAPI Heritage Month, we are kicking off with the adoption series into our Heritage Talk series. Here it is, HeeSun Lee and Dan, aka Dan. Please enjoy.
Hello, HeeSun.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to share this time with you. Thank you so much for being willing to share your experiences with us. I think it could be really informative and helpful to others, hearing about your journey. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us, who was baby HeeSun and what it was like growing up for you.
Yeah, so I was born in Korea in 1983, and then I was given up right away for adoption. I never met my family. I don't really even remember Korea. I was given up at 4 months, and I was adopted into a Chinese American family. And I stress the Chinese part, the American part, because as much as they were Chinese, they were very Americanized. My parents were born here. They're from Brooklyn and Manhattan. So they moved to Staten Island, New York. So by the time I was here, I was in Staten Island. So ever since then, since 4 months old, I've been living in Staten Island, New York. Have not moved since. And it's been, it's not as multicultural. Like Staten Island is out of the 5 boroughs of New York. It's probably the less multicultural than the other boroughs. So I grew up with a lot of white people. There were not many Asians. There's more now, definitely. So when I was growing up, I didn't really think much of my race just because I'm a little kid. But as you keep getting older, things start, you start connecting the dots. You start realizing you're different. And then being on top of that, being adopted kind of added into the whole confusion of everything. So I guess my identity issues started happening more so when I was like beginning of high school, I would say. It started really affecting me, but that's basically my story.
The stressing the American part really resonates for me because I grew up in Hawaii, and I'm older than you, but my parents were there. They were children when World War II happened. So they were in Hawaii when, they actually saw Pearl Harbor getting bombed.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was really a time when Asians in Hawaii were really trying to stress their Americanness, right? Their loyalty to the country. So that really resonates with me as well. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So you did find out sort of, gosh, I realize I am Asian. I'm not like everybody else in my community.
Right.
It happened around high school. So when did you actually realize that you were adopted, or when were you told?
Yeah, so my parents were always good with that. I mean, I don't even remember when they told me. I just kind of grew up knowing. So they were always open about it. Like I said, when I was younger, I didn't see the difference between being Korean and being Chinese. It was just more like, oh, we're Asian, whatever. I just didn't think much of it. And it wasn't until I started getting older and then I started realizing the cultural differences within, even though we're Asian, whether you're Korean or Chinese, there is a big difference. So that started hitting me again. Everything was like high school because there were so many Korean people in my high school. And then that's when I just had like a huge, oh my gosh, I'm Korean. What's going on here? And, you kind of feel a little bit trapped and isolated, I guess is a better word for it, because there's so many Korean people in front of you and around you, but nobody really understands what you're going through. And in fact, a lot of them will judge you because they don't get what you're going through and they think less of you because you're adopted. And it's not like I could go to my family and talk to them about it. So I was just going through something. I was just like a big ball of mess, you know.
It's
Yeah, my
all
brother.
part of the journey, though, right? And finding out
Yeah,
really who you are.
yeah, and whether you're adopted or not, I guess we all kind of go through that. We all trying to figure out what we are and who we are and where we should be and stuff. But I always kind of stuck with the fact that being adopted kind of just adds more to it. It's a lot harder to deal with when you're adopted because you can't just run to somebody and someone can
Right.
fix your problems for you. It's kind of like you have to figure it out yourself and just accept things that you may not never be able to change or know anything about it.
Yeah.
It's heavy when you're young, and even now you're still trying to process it. But when you're young, it really hits hard. So
Yeah, I can appreciate that. It's I'm Japanese, Korean American, and
wow,
so in Hawaii, there's so many
yeah,
ethnicities under Asian, and I used to
mm,
often get asked the question, "What kind of Asian are you?"
right.
Yeah, yeah, and so
That's a very interesting mix, Japanese and Korean. With the whole like clashing of
it is, yeah. Thanks for acknowledging that because that was also a question that I had to learn. Growing up, you just are what you are, you accept it. And then people start
right.
to ask you questions like, how did that happen given the history of the country? And I went back and said, well, what is the history of the country of my heritage? So a
Yeah,
lot of learning, even at my age now, to really kind of go back to my roots, right?
yeah.
Understand.
Do you speak Korean and Japanese or?
I don't. And so that's part of my journey now is learning the language. Um,
Oh,
and I don't know if you share this too, but even though I didn't grow up with super, super heavy influences with the language,
yeah.
as I learn more about Korea and Korean culture, something just hits me inside, like it feels familiar.
Mhm. Yeah.
Have you had those experiences?
Yeah, definitely. And not recently, I guess it's been like 2 years. Ever since COVID happened, I guess because we were on lockdown at the time, I just started getting into like K dramas. Like, I know it sounds funny and stuff, but to this day, like, even just like last night, like, I just watch K dramas like crazy now. And everyone, like, people ask me, like, oh my God, why are you so into them? And I really believe it has something to do with the language and just the culture that even though I feel foreign to it sometimes, it does something to me of knowing that I'm Korean and maybe I'm yearning for things that I never got growing up, like just watching dramas about people growing up in Korea, being with Korean families, eating Korean food, speaking Korean, just that whole environment. So when I watch these shows, it's not something that I experience, but I think it's something that I try and put myself into. And that's why I watch it. It's not really just entertainment for me. It's more like something that I feel like I'm yearning for
Mhm.
indirectly. So I think that's why it does play a big part in my life, without me even realizing it did.
Yeah.
So
Well, we're gonna have to compare notes on K dramas offline because it's about I'm at the point where I only watch Korean shows. I rarely watch
yeah,
American shows, and like you said, there's something for
yeah,
me in the storytelling
right.
that I just really resonates with me. It
Yeah.
feels like home for some
Yeah,
reason.
that's exactly how I feel, which is weird because I've never lived there.
Yeah, and I think that's part of um, why organizations like InWave are so important to me because oftentimes, like the way you grew up, the way I grew up, we can't articulate some of the
Yeah,
discomfort and some of the feelings of both when we feel like we don't belong and when we do belong. It's really hard to
yeah,
articulate sometimes because
yeah,
it does
yeah,
kind of come from a feeling.
yeah. I know.
Yeah.
It's exactly how I feel. It's hard to express, but that's what it is.
Yeah. So we started with when you were born and how you grew up. So today, tell us a little bit about how you identify. So, we sort of talked about there's the way that the world kind of looks at you, maybe with certain stereotypes or what kind of Asian are you, if even if you are Asian, if you're either Chinese or Korean, part of this group or that group.
Yeah.
How would you identify yourself now?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely identify myself as a, Korean American. I do to an extent. Like I feel like I'm you, like I'm half. I am fully Korean, obviously, and when people ask me, I will just say I'm Korean. But there is always going to be a part of me that's Chinese because, as Americanized as my parents are, I did grow up with Chinese traditions. Chinese New Year. I went to all the Chinese banquets, dim sum, Chinese weddings. Just learned. My parents didn't speak Chinese in the household, but my mom speaks broken Chinese with a Brooklyn accent. So my grandmother used to live with me before she passed, and she only spoke Chinese. So it's like that to me is more instilled in me because I lived with it, other than Korean, which I didn't, other than now because my husband's Korean. But so yeah, even though I'm not, I guess, biologically Chinese, I still will tell people that there is Chinese in me. And even with my kids, so my older daughter, she's 10, and I just last year told her that I'm adopted.
Mm-hmm.
So she's very close to my mother, my parents. So I had to kind of tell her that, we're not really related. It's hard to, tell the child that.
Yeah.
I thought she was going to cry and go nuts, but she was actually more curious than anything. She's like, wait, so like your real parents are out there somewhere. And so, grandma and grandpa, they're Chinese, but I'm Korean. So am I really like she asks all these questions I know the answers to, but it's hard to explain to her. So what's funny is that in school for Chinese New Year, I'll make this very fast. I always celebrate Chinese New Year. I bring in like those red envelopes, class and stuff like that. And then one of her teachers one year asked her, "Are you Chinese, Kayla?" And Kayla's like, "I don't know." That's really I don't know.
It's true.
Yes, no clue. She's like, and so that's why she's like confused. She doesn't know what to, and to this day, she still kind of asks me that. And that's kind of how I feel sometimes. Like, yeah, you're not Chinese, but you are. And, I think that's going to be a question mark, something that I'm just going to.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And the best questions come from younger folks, right? It makes me think that we sort of have the ethnicities and the cultures that by birthright, and then the ones that we kind of adopt ourselves, right? Like how much of that do you want to claim? So you were adopted, but how much are you adopting and claiming too?
Wow, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So in terms of that, figuring out for both you and your daughter, what parts of each culture you're sort of claiming as your own identity. What has your journey been to kind of learn about Korean culture?
So yeah, when I was in high school and I realized I was actually Korean, it was good because I was trying to make Korean friends. I was trying to get to know my culture, and I had some like bad experiences with some Korean people in my school, and I don't think it was intentional. Actually, I know it wasn't intentional. They were just being ignorant, So because they would judge me, I couldn't speak the language. I wasn't a typical Korean person. I felt like I didn't embrace my culture anymore. So I went through this whole period of I don't like being Korean. I hate being Korean. I hate Korean people. I was just really not. I was like something was just off with me, and then. Obviously I grew up and I got better with it. And then towards college and as a young adult, I started to realize, this journey is for yourself. HeeSun, like you want to know who you are as a Korean person. Don't look at somebody else and let them define who you are. You are Korean. You were born in Korea. If you want to learn more about Korea, then you do it yourself. Don't ask somebody else to, like I said, define what makes you Korean. I am just as much as Korean as the other person who was born into a Korean family. So once I had that revelation in my mind, then I was able to embrace my culture more. And I think that's why, like I said, I started getting into K-dramas. I married a Korean guy. I try and teach and instill Korean culture into my kids, let them be proud of being Korean. Whereas the high school me would have been like, never marrying a Korean guy. I don't want to do anything with Korean people. But nobody's perfect. No culture is perfect. No person is perfect. So if you're going to judge an entire culture based off of the ignorance of certain people, you're going to miss out on a lot of things. Yeah. So learning things for myself is what got me through it instead of just basing it off of the judgments of others. So now I'm proud. Now I totally embrace it. And, I want to learn more.
That's a lot of strength that you had then. I've experienced something similar where I decided I need to learn as much as I can about my Korean roots. I'm going to learn the language. I'm going to try to find folks in my community that are from Korea. And I experienced the same thing. I even had somebody tell me like, oh, what generation are you? Third generation. Oh, you're American. You're not Korean. Right. Because you don't speak the language and you're too far removed. You really grew up American. Yeah. And so it was really hard to even get in with, you know, groups in Korean churches locally, because I would go to these events and they would only speak Korean. Yeah. They knew I couldn't speak Korean. Right. So, you know, that's actually one of the ways I found Korea Fest, because it was just a place where it was people like you and me. Maybe we don't speak the language or we don't speak it that well, but we just have such a love and a passion and a desire to learn about Korean culture. And it was so welcoming. Right. People of all kinds of backgrounds. And can you talk a little bit about that first experience with Korea Fest or InWave? Yeah,
I mean, I loved it. I believe it was 2019 I was there. Mrs. Lee was, you know, she runs the whole thing. She's amazing. I love her so much. She embraces me. We talk a lot. She knows my story very well. And what I love about Korea Fest is it embraces Korean culture and heritage, and it promotes it to all different cultures. So like you said, you don't feel different. You don't feel judged. There's all different races there. There's the most Koreanized person there to the least Koreanized person there. Like I said, there's other races that aren't even Korean there. And it doesn't matter. It caters to all different types of people. And you can learn so much about being Korean. And that's what I love is being in an atmosphere where you can celebrate being a Korean American person and learning about the culture, and to not feel judged whether you're Korean enough or you know enough or this or that. Obviously, everything is in English, you know, so it's a very welcoming spirit, and I love that, and I promote that just like you do. Finding a place like Korea Fest where it's inclusive. It doesn't matter what background you're from. It's just there to teach you more about Korea and Korean people, you know. So I think that's amazing, and yeah.
So we've talked about how you identify personally, and I know that definitely influences your professional life. And you actually got involved with Korea Fest as part of your career, your professional life. So talk a little bit more about your career and also your identity as an artist.
Yeah, so kind of like what you were just saying earlier about how you adopt certain cultures. You may not be born as it. Not that you could be born as a hip hop artist, but just like the hip hop culture. When I was struggling with my identity in high school, I started getting into hip hop, and then I went to this church in Queens, and it's like a melting pot there, all different cultures. And I remember talking to this Black lady, and we just connected. And then she would just tell me how like she felt about Asian people and how I felt about Black people. And I was like, Black people are just so welcome. You know, I mean, obviously not stereotype or anything, but they were just so welcoming towards me, somebody who's different. Yeah. Whereas my own race, I felt at times were more closed, and I'm the same race as them. And, you know, just different perspectives. Again, could have been a bad bunch of apples that I just met, but that's just what I was feeling at that time. So it was such a warm embrace that, you know, hip hop, I'm Asian, I'm Korean, I'm female, I'm Christian. I talk about positive things. And yet when I was rapping with certain people, like they embraced me. They didn't care what race I was. They didn't care where I came from. They just looked at me and they accepted me for who I was. And that to me spoke millions, you know, and that's what they say, like with music, it doesn't matter what race you are, you know, music can heal everyone. It brings people together. And I feel like that is truly the story of my life, is that once I started doing music, I realized that the world can be friendly. You can be friends with another race and they're not going to judge you. And I think because of the hip hop culture and the artists that I was around, it helped heal me a lot, because it helped, I guess, restore, you know, what I felt about humanity and stuff, you know. So to me, it was just interesting, you know, that they could have judged me. They could have said that, oh, you're Asian, why are you rapping? You know, but they did the exact opposite. They helped me with my craft because I wasn't a great rapper at the time, and they embraced me. They were just such, you know, whoever I was with, they just always worked with me, and it was a community. We were friends. We didn't care about color. And then from there, I never rapped around other Asian people. I was always like in the Black and I guess, you know, Black community and stuff. And then it was only like not a couple of years ago, maybe like 2015-ish, 16-ish. That's when I started getting into the Asian community.
Mm.
Yeah, so I wasn't really involved with Asian people until music-wise until then.
So did music actually kind of spawn out of your journey to learn more about your roots, or were you already doing music?
Yeah, so like when I had that rebellious stage where I was like, I don't want to do anything with Asian people, and I'm just like mad. And then that's when I started rapping, which is, I guess, not the greatest thing. Like, you're angry and you're putting it on a track. But I was Christian, so I was able to maintain my anger in ways where I'm not going to curse on a record. I'm not going to become the next Nicki Minaj, but I'm going to rap how I feel. And I found an organization that was connected to a church in Queens. And it helped me as a Christian that we're brothers and sisters in Christ, and we were able to talk about what we go through, but do it in ways to promote positivity and encourage others. So that's what kind of settled the flames inside of me. So as much as I was going through things and I was rebellious towards my identity and stuff, hip hop really saved me. It helped me. It helped me to not be so angry and to just, have people who accepted me. And through music, I was able to heal. And then through that, that's when I started being okay with being around other Asian people. It was my own issues. It was not, I'm not blaming the Asian community. It was me. I was going through so much, and I was mad and resentful. And
I think that seems to be a common theme, for those of us who are who feel like either they never had a connection to their Korean roots, or for me, I felt like I kind of lost it along the way in this time in our country when it was more important to say you were American than Asian because of the politics and everything, right? And so now trying to reclaim that. But it seems like a common thread that you almost have to experience a point of rejection with it in order to then say, no, I need to reclaim this, and it is still part of me. But, another interesting part of your story is the intersectionality of, yes, it's your Korean roots, but your faith, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that enabled you to express not only what was happening in your personal journey, but in your career. Like, how are you going to tell this story to other people? And what might that mean to other people?
Yeah. I really think if I wasn't Christian and I didn't have that foundation, I don't know. I don't know what I would have turned out to be like. I don't know anything, but I mean, that really grounded me, and being around positive people in my life who directed me on the right path really just made all the difference. I mean, it sounds funny, but I could be like this really secular rapper right now who just raps about sex and whatever you hear on the radio now, I see all these young artists trying to make it, even Asian artists, and they're just doing that. And it's just so heartbreaking to me that, there's no sense of self-worth or anything. So I'm just so grateful that I didn't spiral down that way, and I had people who truly cared about me. And even my parents, who may not have been able to fully understand what I was going through. I mean, they were always there. They were always supporting me. They're always, always my backbone. So, they helped too.
That's great. So with your music and your art, what do you hope to accomplish? What are the messages you want to get out there, and to who?
Yeah. So, I guess just kind of continuing off of my whole faith and stuff is that's always been my purpose as an artist, is to bring faith to other people, to empower women. I think that's very important, especially in the hip hop community, whether you're Christian or not. There's not a lot of females in the industry, and even the ones that are, I feel obviously they're not promoting the correct things, in my opinion. So I want to show people that you can be an artist who looks like me. You can be Asian. You can be female. You can rap about positive things, and you can be successful. You don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to, be on the Grammys or anything, but you can be happy with what you're doing. And on top of that, now I'm also a mother. So a lot of times when I travel, I'm traveling with my kids. So every time you see me in Korea Fest, my kids will be with me. And it's promoting that you can have children, you can be a mother, and you can still do this. You can have a supportive husband by your side who's actually backing you up, and not the opposite, that he's actually he's playing the background and he's letting the woman kind of do her thing. So That's pretty much it. I'm trying to just promote those things to women, that you can take on these type of roles. You don't have to do the traditional. You don't have to do what is expected of you in society. I still get judged to it to this day. People don't take my music career seriously, but I've been doing it for years now, and I'm so grateful that I'm on this path and that I'm able to, meet people like you guys and do Korea Fest. And it's just so life-changing being an artist, being able to meet different people instead of, to me, going to the same job every day, knowing the same people, but to be able to meet so many different types of people through music and traveling. I think that is something you can't buy with money, so.
Yeah. And it really is a gift. I mean, we talk so much about how representation matters. And again, going back to this intersectionality, you're representing so many things in just your one body that so many people can resonate with, whether they are a mother or whether they are trying to have a career in hip hop and rap, or whether it's just about, getting in touch with their Korean roots. And I love the female empowerment, like really showing what women can do. With really good support. Representation is so important. So glad you're out there and doing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So I want to hear who has been your biggest influences, or maybe it was an interaction or an encounter that you would say has been one of the most influential things in your life so far.
Yeah. So I think, like what we were talking about, just my whole adoption thing and my identity, and that really and my faith has what brought me to make the music that I've made. That obviously is like, what is it? Is that the catalyst? What is it called? Whatever, the foundation of why I started rapping and stuff. Yeah. But I mean, growing up, musical influences, I guess it's the typical stuff. I looked up to, I loved Eve from Rough Riders, Lauryn Hill. I think every female artist loved Lauryn Hill and stuff. And my biggest one of all was, I love Tupac. They all go against the things that I stand for, but Tupac was just so in what he believed in. He had no hold, but like he just said it, like he was very passionate about what he did. And that's what and he was poetic. So I thought that was a great thing. So I looked up to him a lot in that aspect, So when you see influential figures like that who break barriers and do all, like Lauryn Hill and Tupac, without a doubt, you can't deny their talent and what they have done in society. And people hated them. People judge them to this day. They still judge Lauryn Hill, but look at what they've done, look at all the doors they've opened for other artists and stuff. So I hope I can do that as well with the littler platform that I have, is to be able to help other Asian female artists or just women artists in general, to be able to say, hey, you are the minority and people may not listen to you at first or take you seriously, but you just get that mic and just do it anyway, and eventually somebody's going to listen. So, and now I think the biggest influence are my kids. I think it goes with the age that you're at. Is kids. My really, really quick story. My youngest daughter is on the spectrum. She's autistic and she's not very verbal. She's kind of verbal. So the beginning of our story was talking about language and how it's so important. And I'm realizing more and more how important language is, especially with my daughter who doesn't really have it. You realize how language connects people and it defines culture and stuff. So when you don't have that language, whether it's English or anything, it's almost like a part of you is just missing. Right. And when I see my daughter, I feel for her because, she doesn't have that part of her. And, she expresses herself in other ways, but it's been very hard for her. So, when I'm, I guess, doing music or up on stage, I try and think of that and just want to be an advocate for that and to let people know there's other ways of language and promoting how you express yourself. So,
that's amazing. That's another part of you that I think could resonate with a whole other segment out there, to see, languages. And I imagine too, there's in the other ways that you communicate with your daughter, there's probably a lot of beauty in there and the rest of us just may not be attuned to it. Right.
Yeah. It's, you notice the things that you would have never noticed before, It's she's taught me so much in her little body. So
that's incredible. Yeah. I look forward to meeting her too at Korea Fest.
Yeah, she'll definitely be there. She loves she sings actually. She loves to sing, which is
That's
funny. It's
amazing.
autism's so interesting. Like she may not be able to have a story with you, but she can rehearse and sing an entire song, which is so amazing to me. It's very interesting.
Yeah, but it's amazing. So I want to maybe end our time together. It was way too short. With just hearing, you know, as you're embarking on your personal journey and your career, what other messages or what would you like folks to know?
Yeah, I'm pretty much everything. Yeah, what I'm still, I guess, piggybacking off of what I'm saying now is that, you know, if you have the desire and the drive to go after your dreams and your passion to just do it. And I am, you know, it sounds so conceited when I say this, but there's no other way I can say it. But you know, I am living proof, I guess, that you know, I may, like I said, may not make millions of dollars. I may not be on national TV, but I am satisfied with the path that I have taken, to be able to just spread a little positivity into people's lives through the stages that I have been on. It has been all worth it. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm so dark in here. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I look at some of my friends or other people that I know who may be making so much more money than me. They may have a stable job. But I feel like what I do and being able to impact other people's lives and to meet different people and to learn about different cultures, I feel like that's just something that I would never regret ever doing. So, you know, to people out there, think outside the box, you know, try not to fit in, you know, be different and don't be scared of that. There's so much going on in this world right now that's promoting inclusivity and showing that it's okay to be different. You don't have to, you know, go with the standard. So I encourage anybody who's listening to do just that. That you are you and nobody else is you, and you have something to offer. So, you know, go after it and don't be scared. I mean, you can be scared, but still do it.
Don't let fear paralyze you.
There you go. That's a good one. You know.
Well, HeeSun, you're really an artist with a purpose. And I really love that you explicitly stated that, you know, that yes, we all want to make money. We need to make money in order to live, but in your art, try to have purpose and meaning for others. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being able to spend this time with you. It's such a privilege.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yes, it was a great time.
Yeah, I loved hearing your story.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. Super excited to be here with you, Dan. I'm just going to start off with kind of an overall question, right? Just an overall question to kind of just to get to know you a little bit more. And that is, what was it like growing up?
We're just going to jump right into it. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Growing up was pretty normal for myself. You only know what you know. And so for me, I only really know what it was like growing up like me, where I was. So it was a pretty good experience. I had really loving parents. As a lot of you might know, I'm adopted. And so I grew up with not with my biological family. I grew up with my family in Ventura County, and it was a great experience. I really love my parents, and they gave me a pretty traditional and what we consider to be an American upbringing. I was part of the Boy Scouts, apple pie, all of the regular, normal American things that people usually think about.
Now, Ventura County, so that everyone know where that is, right? Where is Ventura County?
Nobody knows where that is. Very small location. It's right between LA and Santa Barbara in Southern California.
Okay. But that's where you grew up, but that's not where you were born.
I was born in Korea. Yep. I was born in South Korea off of the coast of Busan in an island called Gojido. And there is where I was born. And then I was adopted pretty immediately when I was 8 months old.
At 8 months, you were adopted and then brought to the U.S.
Yes.
Okay. So any siblings, who else, anyone grew up with you?
I have a sister. Her name's Jamie, and she is my sister. And then I also have biological siblings. I've got a biological sister and a biological brother who just happens to be my twin brother. So I got it was a mind-blowing thing to find that out. Basically what it was about 8 years ago. Yeah, 8 years ago is when I first met them. I did a biological family search, And then I discovered that not only was my biological family still together, but I had an identical twin brother that I never knew about. And getting to know him and my family over the last 8 years has just been incredible.
Okay, wait. We're gonna get there, but we got to go back so we can really understand. Okay, what is happening? So you were adopted at 8 months, brought to the U.S. in Ventura County in California is where you grew up. At any time growing up, when did you figure out or find out that, hey, I may be adopted?
I think that I always just kind of knew I was adopted. It's one of those things where you definitely look and feel different than your family. And for me, I think my family had always just told me, it was a part of my upbringing that I knew I was adopted. So it wasn't something that was a big surprise, and that obviously wouldn't have been a surprise when I got into kindergarten a little bit older. I think that's definitely an area where you start thinking more about your identity and who you are. And if you don't look like your parents, it's something obviously must be connected to your story that makes you understand that you were born of a different family.
And so in growing up and being in school, what were some of the challenges or obstacles you had growing up, being different? Or no, I wasn't, you didn't feel different in the family, just at school? I mean, where were those challenges and kind of obstacles coming in?
I think that in general, where I grew up, there weren't a lot of other Asian people. And I think just naturally, kids are mean, when you're growing up, kids just don't know where their children are the most brutal critics because they just say it like it is.
Yeah.
And I think that whether or not they know it's wrong or whatever, they see something that is different or doesn't speak to their experience, and then they call it out.
Mhm.
So it obviously makes people, when they're growing up, feel a little bit different, which is natural. And I think it's just a part of everybody's upbringing. Everybody feels a little bit different in their situation, whether or not you're part of the majority or not the majority. I think people still find ways to make people feel different or to find ways to adapt. And so I dealt with that. And I think that through having to be a part of the minority growing up, it really, I think, gives you a different point of view on life. You really have to, I think, become a lot more self-conscious. You're a lot more self-aware of who you are. And a lot of negative things, but a lot of positive things come out of that. I think that naturally you build a thicker skin. You have to kind of adapt a little bit more. And so I think those are all things that have carried with me until today in positive ways.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So your parents, were they, your sister, was that their biological child? Was she adopted as well? Was she Korean? Was she a different ethnicity?
She was adopted as well, Korean.
Mm-hmm.
And she, not blood of myself, but we grew up. And I think that through that situation, and really just growing up adopted in general, I think really gives you a different feeling what family is. Family is whatever is true to you.
Oh, wow.
Anybody can really be family. You don't necessarily need to be blood. I think blood is a different level of family. Obviously, if you're blood, it's a thing that you, just another layer of the family. But true family, true love, that can come from anybody, anywhere. If you're in a situation where you've got a very loving family, or you've got friends that you've just been through a lot of experiences with, through those experiences and through the times that you share, that's where family, I think, comes from.
Okay. So moving towards finding your biological family, before this point, how were you identifying, or how did you identify with yourself?
You really become a sponge for everything that's around you. So that's why I think that environment ultimately probably shapes you a lot more than your straight DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's which is what nurture versus nature. I think it's nurture way more than nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think nature obviously gives you what you look like, which is ultimately probably affects your nurture too, because people will naturally treat you based off of the way that you look and the way that you are, and whether or not you're naturally innately good at certain things or not good at certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But from that, your environment, I think, really shapes the person you are. So growing up, not with a lot of Korean or Asian people around me, I didn't really necessarily feel Asian. Mm-hmm. I looked Asian. And so I often really wanted to know what that really meant, but I grew up with a different experience than that. And like I mentioned before, because of the American upbringing, I knew what Boy Scouts was. I listened to a lot of country and rock music and classic rock music. My TV media was Nickelodeon, and my radio was whatever was on the radio. So that was my experience growing up.
Okay. So now what made you decide to go and find your biological family?
I think everybody has a need to know where they came from. And I think it's a natural thing for a lot of adoptees to wonder where they came from and to know who their family was or who it was that they ultimately got their DNA from. So that's just a natural inkling. Whether or not you're adopted or not, you always just want to know where you came from. You want to know your family tree. So I was able to do a biological family search, but again, about 8 years ago, and I just got really lucky that it worked out. And because for a lot of adoptees, it doesn't work out at all. Usually, you search and nothing will happen, or you search and then you do find something, but it leads you to a lot of dead ends, or just it doesn't like lead to anything. So I think I just got very lucky that my biological family was in the place to be able to meet me, and it was at a time where I could meet them, and it was a overall positive experience too. Because for a lot of people, it's not a positive experience. For a lot of people, it's very tragic, or the family doesn't want to meet them, or they meet once and that's basically it. So I got very lucky that my biological family's still in my life.
So did that mean you ventured to Korea?
It does. Yes, I've been to Korea quite a number of times. A long time ago, I went to Korea for the first time when I was 20, and then the last time I was there was 8 years ago when I was 27, and then beyond that, I've been to Korea about 3 or 4 other times. So I've been back to Korea quite a number of times since I've met them, just to keep them in my life. And because of COVID, I wasn't able to go back when I usually would have gone back, but hopefully next year I'll go back again. I'm very excited about seeing Korea again.
So very connected to your biological family, just as you're connected to your adopted family. Parent-wise, how have they been on the biological and the adopted side of you searching and then kind of creating that bond across? You know, because you're that glue, right? That kind of connects both sides. How has that been?
You know, it's amazing that everything that could have gone right went right. It's been a positive experience in both my biological as well as my family side. I'm really happy that they've been able to meet, and they've been able to meet one another too. And so it's been amazing to be able to just have these families that never would have met each other otherwise in my life. And it's been very supportive. My mom's very supportive of the experience. And again, it's just a very lucky thing, whereas this usually doesn't happen to anybody.
Right. So let's talk about culture.
Yes.
And you've got American culture, you've got Korean culture. How do those two play a big part in your life? Now going to Korea, meeting your family, I'm sure you were exposed to a lot of things while you were there. How does that now play in your life as versus before?
I think that now I just know a lot more about being Korean. I'm trying to learn the language. I feel a lot more connected, especially meeting my biological family. It makes me feel more connected. Back in the day, I didn't have any connection to my Korean culture beyond just like being by blood. I look Korean. And so, but I still like tried to look into it. It was a big part of like who I wanted to be. So it was fun learning about that, trying to get into K-pop, trying to listen to more Korean music and Korean media. And I think actually the really positive thing about being from South Korea is that compared to a lot of other Asian nationalities or backgrounds, there is quite a lot of Korean media out there, like K-pop and K-dramas. And even when I was growing up in the 90s and 2000s, that there was just a lot of like Korean media that was out there. So I think because of that, there was just a lot more connections for me to be able to like see my culture. That, again, just I got very lucky versus maybe if I was from a different place that didn't have necessarily a lot of access to that specific media, maybe it would have been a lot more difficult.
Yeah, yeah. I can understand that. Now you are an artist. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep, I go by Dan, aka Dan. I recently put out my 3rd album. I'm really proud of it. I've been able to work with a lot of really amazing producers and other musicians. And it's an album that I'm extremely proud about. I've been doing music for about 12, 13 years now. And again, whatever, I got very lucky. Whatever could have gone right, went right. I can't believe I get to still do music. You know what I mean?
Now tell us about the genre and where that pulls from.
It's indie rap, and so it's a big eclectic mix of hip hop, rock, and other influences. If you know the Gorillaz, I think the Gorillaz are a really good example of the type of music that I make. They use a lot of like rock and rap and different other like eclectic electronic sounds in their music, and so that's what I'm all about, and that's where I come from. So it's kind of I find a good place for myself within the music scene, because I think what I'm doing is pretty original. I don't think there's a lot of other artists that are doing exactly what it is that I'm doing. So I consider myself to be very lucky that I found a space that I can grow in and that I really believe in too. I think that I'm really authentic, and the music that I make comes from a very personal place. So I feel very proud to be able to do it. And for a lot of musicians too, a lot of artists, that the goal is just to be able to put out things that you can feel proud about and that really speaks to who you are. And it's really been very therapeutic for me to be able to get out the music that I've been able to put out. So again, just very lucky.
So now going back to your family just a little bit, because you have a twin who is also an artist.
I do. Yeah. He used to rap, not necessarily he wasn't necessarily able to continue to do it, but he does do it, and he was able to do it before, which is crazy. But I actually think what the more significant thing is that we're both writers. And I think that's actually what comes out. He's got a couple of graphic novels that are, I think, out through Kakao or Web2, whatever the platform is out in Korea. And so he's written a couple of like actual graphic novels, which are way longer than songs, and just as impressive. So it's cool to be able to see him in that space. And I think that's what I actually think reflects where our biology meets, is there's something in it that we're both writers and that we have this ability. I actually think that he's probably a much better writer than I am, but he has the stuff out, and it's exciting to see.
Now, your biological father or mom, are they done anything in the creative space?
No, as far as I know, nothing like that. But I think it's probably really similar though to a lot of other immigrant families or people where their parents are probably artistic in some way, but they just didn't get the chance to be able to, I think, fulfill that part of them because they were busy surviving and living in a generation where they're just coming up and their main priority was taking care of their family and themselves. So I feel very lucky. This is something that I've been able to explore because it's a very fulfilling part of my life. And I'm sure that it comes from something that, like, maybe if they were given the chance to be able to really explore it, maybe they would have. But I don't know of anything particularly that stands out in my head of what they've exactly done that's artistic. But I know that it's probably something that they would have been able to do.
Your journey has been amazing, and you documented this journey. You've been able to document this journey.
Yeah, please. The YouTube, it's up there, up on the YouTube. I called it the YouTube, and it's up on the YouTube. But what I mean is the YouTube series is up on the YouTube. So just look up DANakaDAN Korean. You'll find it. Would love for you guys to watch that. There's 2 series on there. And then all of my music and whatnot is out there too.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You talked about dropping an album recently dropped.
Yes.
Like, what was that, May 4th?
It came out actually the album came out in February. So it's been a little while, but I've been slowly releasing other songs that have come out over the last couple of weeks. And I'm actually, by the time that this video comes out, the full length version of it should be out. So again, just all of these songs that there's an EP here, a single here. I'm going to put everything together and release it all together probably at the end of the month.
Wow. Now, do you think that the writing is the way you express trying to find yourself?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I write to escape and or remember. I think there's a lot of things that I'm unable to verbalize on a daily basis. And I think having it in song version allows that experience to be out there. And in a weird cathartic way, knowing other people are listening to me talk about those things is very helpful. It's kind of like doing therapy without actually talking out loud. When people can just listen to it, you're like, oh, I know that person's listening to this song. And so I don't even have to like talk about it anymore because it's out there. So I just consider myself very lucky that those are things that are part of my experience too.
What's next for you?
I think that after the songs that I put out, I'm probably going to try to write maybe 1 or 2 more songs this year. And then, I just want to chill. It's been a very, not just me, everybody's just going through a lot of stuff, and everybody goes through it in a different way. And I haven't had time to really, I think, process the cons and the pros of my life. And I need to take some time to process, because if you don't recognize and honor those feelings, that it's kind of disrespectful to yourself. So I need to take some time to really just think about where I'm currently at and to honor all of the things that have happened to me, good and bad. So that'll happen over the summertime, basically. That's my gist. And maybe if there's an opportunity, bring me out to North Carolina, because I would love to perform.
Hey. Yeah, we got to get you out here. Definitely have to figure out how to get you out here to North Carolina. Let me ask you this question, conflict-wise. And I'm really talking from a social perspective, right? You look one way, you sound another way. It sounds like that you really, really have embraced, I'm just who I am, take it or leave it, I am who I am. But how have you dealt with that throughout your life to get to this point?
I think that it just takes a lot of, I'm a very self-aware person. I think it just takes a lot of reflection. And then it's kind of like a ping pong board. I'm trying to think of like a good example, but it's basically like, if this was, that game Pong, where like you have the thing and then the ball goes back and forth. It's basically like that. And you go through your entire life, and like your brain or the things that you're feeling just bounce back and forth. And that it just takes a lot of that to like happen until you can reach a conclusion. So it's taken me until like maybe the last 3 or 4 years for me to I think feel comfortable with where I'm at. But it's only because I've had to go through a lot of self-reflection over and over and over again. And I do it. Sometimes I think too much about it, but I guess I'm happy that I do that, because ultimately I think it makes me a more conscious person of the things that I'm doing and the things around me.
Okay. So I know that you got to experience Korea, and you were a part of Korea Fest. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Korea Fest in North Carolina, when I came 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, it was wonderful. I love the show. Again, hopefully somebody please invite me back. I would love to perform again. It means a lot to be able to do shows in different places. So I'm 100% for wanting to do more of these things. Great experience. And then being in Korea is just amazing too. I love it. The culture, just as somebody that feels a stranger to being out there, it looks amazing. And it feels really great to just be around so many things that are so familiar, but so different.
Tell me a little bit about, because I want to talk about InWave, but before we do that, tell me a little bit about how do you feel, or your experience of going to Korea and then being around people who look like you when you grew up, kind of as the person that stood out a little bit, right? Because you didn't look like everyone else around you.
Yeah, I think it's just being heightened self-awareness. So being out there, I'm even more self-aware of the fact that I look like so many people, but I feel so different. So it feels kind of good, because I'm just walking around, and it feels very interesting that just everybody around me potentially looks like me. But in the same way, I know that they know that I'm not Korean. The way that I walk, the way that I talk, it's not how Koreans talk or walk, and they can instantly know that I'm American. So it also feels different. I know that they're looking at me differently too. But with that said, it's all love, man. It's just a fun experience. It's interesting.
Yeah, I understand that. I totally do. So music is where you feel like you fit in. This is my jam right here. Writing and just being creative zone is kind of where you can be 100% you, would you say?
Yeah. I think that when I'm on stage, I'm the most present. It takes those moments to be able to feel just locked into being who I am.
Yeah, yeah. And InWave is brought Korea Fest, right? And it's, although it's out of North Carolina, it is way, way bigger than North Carolina. Over 2,000 viewers, participants that have been part of it in the past, and even the virtual brought, you know, thousands and thousands of people together. You know, they educate and unite community through informative and entertaining programming, which is what they brought you on to kind of, as a Korean artist, American Korean artist, you know, to come on and entertain, but also shining a spotlight on the impact, the mission and vision of InWave, which is to promote diverse, engaging opportunities. And you do that through your music. And so you kind of connected with InWave. How did you get started with Korea Fest? Was it just an invitation? Did you see something about it before?
I think it was an invitation, and I'm just very, very Hyuk, the woman that's in charge of it in North Carolina, she invited me on, and I'm just very thankful to her and her family. They've got a very loving family and very supportive of what I was doing, and they were just the kindest people. So I'm very thankful to all of them for bringing me out and for staying in touch and for always providing opportunities. It really means a lot.
Nice. Now, last question I have for you, and that is definitely, after being in Korea, what's the influence in your music?
I listened to, before I was still listening to Korean music. I don't think it's really necessarily changed since going to Korea and coming back, but I definitely, like, I love Epic High. That's like one of my top acts, period, American or Korean. And I listened to a lot of Epic High music. Maybe I listened to a little bit more after I came back from Korea, but I'm heavily influenced by like Epic High. So I think some of the songs, I've given that to my producer saying, hey, I want something that sounds like that. I've got maybe like one or two songs that I think really fulfills that request. And so that's kind of probably the biggest influence.
Dan, let me just tell you, you are amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm listening to you talk about self-awareness and just taking life, the journey itself, right? And kind of riding that journey, being a little bit flexible to, okay, this is what it is. Well, let's see where that goes and let's see how this pans out and get there. I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing a little bit of your story. I know it's the tip of the iceberg. We're sharing a little bit of your story with us and sharing your heart definitely with us. Thank you so much for being here. I have one last question for you. And at the end of the day, and I know you have a long ways to go, but I usually say legacy is not when you end your life, at the end of your life. Legacy is what you do every day that creates that legacy. So what is your legacy?
It's whatever I get a chance to do things like this, or being able to just continue to talk about what it is that's on my mind. It's a blessing, and I'm very grateful for that. And I thank you, and I thank everybody that's watching for watching this. It means a lot. So hopefully that doesn't answer your question, but it's just gratitude. I'm very grateful for all this. Thank you for watching. Follow me, DANakaDAN, all the socials. Please listen to my music. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got to get you back for Korea Fest.
Yes, bring me on person. Let's do it.